Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around some form of football. My name is Suj.
And my name is James.
It's Tuesday. Feels like a long week this week. I don't know why. Maybe because of the long bank holiday weekend.
Hasn't it just felt like a long couple of months?
True. Maybe it is that it's all blurring into one.
I
But it
think
feels
so,
like that's
mate.
only Tuesday. Wow. Yeah, incredibly weird. So today is People's Poll Day. What were the options, James, and what won?
Options were Macclesfield Town, who last week received a 7-point reduction, which really cuts them adrift at the bottom of League Two. This was for failing to pay their players in February and also for failing to fulfil a fixture against Plymouth Argyle in December. So the idea was to go and do some investigating on that because they're at the top of the tree of clubs that could well become the next Bury. Another one in the poll was about the US women's team's attempts to gain equal pay with their male counterparts. I think would have been a thoroughly interesting and possibly controversial conversation, but that didn't win either. The winner of the vote is the subject of footballers and gambling, very much back in the headline, well, not back at the top of the headline because there's nothing on the telly other than coronavirus, but back in the sports headlines a little bit following Kieran Trippier's charge a couple of weeks ago in relation to bets placed when he moved from Tottenham to Atletico Madrid. Where should we start with this one? Should we start with Trippier?
I think there's a lot of people. Yeah, I think Trippier and work backwards. There's a lot of people that don't know what happened, why he has been charged. He obviously hasn't been sentenced as yet, but it's the FA that have charged him. To be clear, and now that he's in La Liga, it makes it a little bit difficult to punish him necessarily. In the same way that Sturridge was a couple of years ago. They can still roll out a ban, right, or a fine, but the ban will only be applicable to English football. I don't know if they can translate the ban into La Liga necessarily.
No, they can, and that's part of what happened with Daniel Sturridge, which we'll come on to as well. Essentially, there's a little bit of a solidarity agreement between all UEFA associations, is my understanding. That so bans from one competition would be held over to another. So say, for example, you get sent off on the last day of the season in La Liga and then move to the Premier League. You will serve that ban in the Premier League, for example.
Right. Okay, so makes sense.
If Trippier gets a ban, he will be suspended from UEFA competitions, La Liga, etc. And judging by what's happened with Sturridge, which seems like quite a similar case to Trippier is looking at a lengthy ban here, and I don't think he's going to get away with it. So
and interestingly, could he serve his ban whilst this hiatus from football was running?
Well, yeah. I mean, the slightly laughable thing about Daniel Sturridge is Daniel Sturridge received basically a 2.5-month ban at the start of March. Sorry, 3.5-month ban, which is due to finish in mid-June. Now, Daniel Sturridge severed ties with Trabzonspor, his club he was playing for at the time in Turkey. But he basically wouldn't have missed no football, which is the irony of it, right?
No.
And could have still had that contract. We'll come back onto Sturridge. I just want to cover what's happened with Trippier because it is an interesting one to follow over the next week or so because he has until next Monday to appeal this charge.
Right. Well, the thing is, we're talking about gambling in football.
Yeah.
Yet, the two players that we just spoke about, Sturridge and Trippier, have been charged with breaking football betting rules, yet they haven't placed any bets. They haven't been accused of placing any bets.
And they also haven't bet on a football match.
Which is why it's even more bizarro.
But
I understand.
To take a step back, which part of this obviously is to clarify what are the rules. So the FA put out a big initiative in 2014 where the rules for betting on any football market, be it player transfers, next manager to be sacked, anything like that. You couldn't, if you're a Premier League footballer, you couldn't bet on Brazilian football. Essentially, the rules were very, very clear. If you ban on any football-related market, you are done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been around for 6 years now.
Yep.
So whether rightly or wrongly, I mean, look, there's no reason why a Kieran Trippier, and he's not, but shouldn't be able to bet on the Korean football at the moment, right? But again, it was something linked into UEFA to stop, I don't know, Trippier might have a mate at some Korean team who knows what the team's going to be or something, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just to stop any sort of exploitation of inside information or something. That wouldn't stop me or you having some inside information on that Korean football match and betting on it, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Basically, Trippier has been charged because of suspicious betting surrounding his move to Atletico Madrid in July of last year. Now, Trippier's, and I just want to give you a quote from Trippier, which is quite interesting, which he said a couple of weeks ago when he was given this charge. He said, "I've fully complied with the FA's investigation over the past several months on a voluntary basis and will continue to do so. I want to make it clear that while a professional footballer, I have at no stage placed any football-related bets or received any financial benefit from others betting. However, what he doesn't say in that quote is, I haven't told my mates to make money on what I'm about to do. And that's why he's going to get done."
Similar for Daniel
In
Sturridge,
my opinion,
with the loan moved into Milan. I think Daniel Sturridge's situation got triggered by somebody placing a £10,000 bet on his loan move to Inter Milan potentially happening before he ended up signing for West Brom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on, finish if you will.
It's just
Sorry.
like, why would you bet 10 grand on something like that? It just doesn't seem sensible. You worked in a bookies before. That if someone walked in and said, "I want to put 10 grand on so and so going on loan to so and so," you'd say, "What?"
Well, the thing with that sort of bet is that is immediately gonna be flagged up suspicious activity.
Mm-hmm.
If Daniel Sturridge knew me and had said to me, "Yeah, listen, I'm on my way to Inter Milan. They're 20-1 now to sign me. Go and stick a tenner on down the bookies, make a couple of £100 for yourself." No one's going to know.
No,
exactly. It's not. Yeah, it's just me walking in a betting shop, no problem at all. Now, when I worked in the industry, in terms of that sort of bet, they were very much restricted, certainly at counter level in terms of in shop. We were probably any sort of special bets, as you would call them, i.e., next manager to be sacked or next manager or who's going to which club, who'll be bought by team X, were normally restricted to, depending on market, somewhere between sort of £25 and £50 bets as a maximum to stop any sort of suspicious activity. Therefore, the only other way to do them was either by phone or over the internet. Now, to do it by phone or over the internet, you have to have an account, right? So there's an exact tracing of an individual placing X bets, right?
Yeah.
What's happened in the case of Sturridge, by the looks of it, is he's advised his brother, I believe, to say that he was going to go to Inter Milan and then to Sevilla as well, who he also didn't join. He actually ended up going to West Bromwich Albion, but advised them potentially
because they're so comparable.
Exactly, Inter Milan, Seville, West Bromwich, as you are, right, in terms of destinations of the world.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so I mean, they didn't even make any money out of it, is worth saying, right? But Sturridge obviously thought one of these moves looked like it was going to happen. He tipped off his brother. And I think his brother didn't want it to be traced to Sturridge, so he then asked the mate to put the bet on. That seems to be the case with it. Now, what Sturridge is obviously claiming, and he put out a video before mutually terminating his agreement with Trabzonspor, was to say that, like, he didn't say go and put the bet on. He said, "I'm probably going to here." Now, what Sturridge has tried to fight against since, and he's obviously going to accept this ban because he ain't missing no football anyway, although he's obviously unattached to any club at the moment, is that he's confided in a family member that he's going to go and join a certain club. Now, if you're, remove the betting for a second, if you were going to work in a different job, particularly in a different country, Suj, you think you might maybe share that with someone?
No. And there's a real reason why, right?
But you're just going to turn up there 2 weeks
later. Because I want to get away.
By the way, I'm in Spain. I want to
get away from her. Yeah. When it gets a bit chilly here, I might pop home. No, I'll tell you why. I think that they should, both Trippier and Sturridge should have known better. So I'm gonna make a couple of assumptions here, but I think it's a fair assumption that footballers, as part of what they get support-wise from the PFA, are educated and trained on what they are and aren't allowed to do. So do you think it's fair to assume that footballers, it's not that they are left to their own devices to go and read the FA's rules? I feel like the FA and clubs and agents sit them down and say, look, you cannot do this. And as they're coming and signing professional terms, they get trained on it, right? So they should know better because they have been given the training. I've got a very, very good friend who works in the city as a trader for one of the banks. I don't know which one. I hate them all. They're all money-grabbing bastards. Honestly, but you're talking about 7- and 8-figure kind of bonuses and big time. He's been doing it for 15 years. And to be honest, he works hard and all credit to him. We'll go down the pub with the boys, or we'll go for a curry, or more recently, Zoom chats and poker and whatever. I'll always jokingly, over a pint, what's going on, mate? Give us a tip, will you? Because he's trading every day. Never, ever, ever, ever has he ever even let anything slip, nor will he ever. Like, you could just tell, he has so tuned his mind out to anybody asking him any question, zip, straight away. And that's what I think footballers need to be. Like, they just need to train their mind to just zip. And I find it impressive that when I try and just say, what's happening with this? Or what's happening with that he's deadpan and will not give anything away, because he knows and has been told that the risk of insider trading is so huge, or giving a tip away, that it could end up in worse than probably what's going to happen to some of these guys.
Yeah,
so
understood.
They should know better. Now,
is that comparable, though, to saying, "Hi, bruv, I'm moving to Italy next week"? But
you know that you're not allowed to talk about it. So if I was in a footballer's situation...
But you're just real life for a minute. And I think what Sturridge has done is I'm not trying to particularly defend him. I'm just saying, is it right to actually say here, to not be able to trust a family member to say, by the way, I'm moving country? Or do you just have to pick up the phone at the other end?
You probably could, right? But my mate goes home to see his mum and dad. His dad's like, how's work? Yeah, it's doing all right. Dad said, have you made any good trades recently? Can't tell you. Just like, is there a deal in the pipeline? Yeah, there is. Are you going overseas? Yeah, I am. You don't have to be specific about the country. You don't have to be specific about the club. You've got to... the rules are very, very black and white. I don't even think there's any grey area here. Now... There is, I'm saying this with a real pinch of salt, an argument to be made about the education of footballers, right? You see it in not just this, but other stuff that they do that is dumb. And they get a lot of money at a very young age, and they don't necessarily always get the best education, right? My mate who's a trader in the city is a completely different ballgame to somebody who's been playing football from the age of 12 or 13 years old. Completely different chalk and cheese. So could more be done to sort out the education of these guys to help them understand? My son just walked into the background like, as if he doesn't care about anything. So this is where I think, should they know better? Well, there's no grey area in this, James. There's no grey area in this.
No, I agree. And listen to you speak there, I guess you could say, listen, bruv, I'm going to be leaving the country. I'll tell you next week where I am. I know what you're saying. I don't know. What about if it's someone you actually live with, like your wife? Or
sure.
We just assume because it's a woman, like, she won't do it? Or
no. I feel like then they should, like, if I ever had any, I would tell my wife, do not share this with anyone.
Okay. Yeah. Is that the right way to live life? Just removing football from it? It just doesn't feel right.
Look, whilst gambling's legal and people bet on things, it's going to happen, right? It's going to happen. It does make it difficult.
More the cases in terms of exploitation here, where we've had one player banned and another one is very likely to be banned. And we possibly have to relook at it and say, should these markets exist? Because they're speciality bets, right?
Yeah. I think you should get rid of those kind of things. Now, we're talking about betting in football. The Premier League is a very well-run, well-organised machine that you wouldn't expect any match fixing or any dodgy influence. And we spoke last week about Olympiacos and potentially match fixing there. Now, people would have lost money on those games potentially. Take it to another level. Look at cricket and Pakistan, right? This is where now organised crime was getting involved and you're talking about undue pressure and influence on a bowler, an 18-year-old kid at the time he was, to bowl no balls or whatever he was doing. So these markets open themselves up to this. And I don't think it's organised crime, mafia influencing players in the Premier League won't happen. But the third division of some club in Eastern Europe, it could. And you can still bet on that, right? You can bet on anything. It's amazing what you can bet on. And who knows if there's influence in that or not. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, you do open yourself up to influence.
Yeah, I mean, the closest we've had to actual match fixing in the Premier League era, certainly in England, is obviously you had sort of Grobbelaar, John Fashanu and Hans Sagers were all investigated in the mid-90s, but were basically cleared. Mm-hmm. And a revelation in Matt Letizier's book that he tried to kick the ball out straight away from kickoff in terms of they were trying to fix not the result, but basically the time of the first throw-in the match. He tried to kick the ball out and failed.
Those are the funniest.
The FA took no action against Letizier because his career had finished, basically.
These are what Trippier and Sturridge did is very low level in the scale of betting and what have you. And it's more stupidity or just complacency than it is anything else. It's no malicious intent here, in my opinion.
In the case,
so the ban for Sturridge of 4 months is pretty hefty.
And £150,000 fine as well. It's not a joke. I realise he's obviously been on very good money.
A lot of money.
But that's a sizable amount of money for a fine for an individual, isn't it? When you consider how many times have Lazio been fined £3,000 for racism or something, right? Like £150,000 a lot of money for an individual.
So unfair. Yeah.
Now, what's worth saying to counter that point in terms of how much that is, in the case of Sturridge, certain members who knew Sturridge allegedly tried to place several more bets, which would have lost, by the way, but were blocked. And that's when the suspicion got raised. Now, had those bets come in, the value would have been to over £300,000. So suddenly, I don't know. In the case of Trippier, what we don't know yet, and I'm sure this will come out in the next couple of months, it could just be that he's tipped off his mate and said, stick 25 quid on me, and it comes up. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. He might have the same surname and he's done the bet stupidly on his Betfair account or something with the surname Trippier, and it's made, hang on, this is like alerted people or something. It could be something as simple as that, which obviously we have no information on whatsoever. I suspect, I'm not saying that Trippier told whoever it is to go and have a bet on his move, but certainly Trippier, as obviously we discussed at the top, he has certainly confided and said, I'm going, and someone somewhere has taken advantage of this and made some money out of it. That's how it looks.
These two stories have made the headlines, and I think that the underlying problem with betting in football is probably the actual real problem is a different one, which is much worse. That's swept under the carpet, which is players who actually do go and bet and are losing money. I mean, we talked about Joey Barton, and it's amazing that this is getting the headlines here. I bet in the Premier League, out of however many players there are, let's say there's 700 players, there's going to be a handful that have got gambling problems.
A handful?
Okay, there's going to be
Would Joey Barton reckons... Joey Barton got banned for 18 months for having several football bets over around about a 12-year period, which was then reduced to 13 months, but essentially finished his playing career, basically. Now, Joey Barton reckons that 50% of the Premier League were gambling every week.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the likes of Michael Owen and co who've got race horses and they're into all of that. There's no doubt that they're gambling on that. And they've probably got, I wouldn't say inside information, but they got their mates with all the top trainers of all the top race horses and other sports that they can bet on as well, which are not football. So taking that into consideration, maybe when you see situations like this, it drives the problem underground a little bit, because they're like, look how badly they got done with that. I'm just going to not ever talk about my gambling problems and addiction or whatever it may be. Difficult, because they are still young.
Well, yeah, perhaps is more in terms of the wider conversation is what's being done to help these people. I mean, Andros Townsend is one who got done actually before this 2014 law got physically enforced. I think it was him, Cameron Jerome and Dan Gosling, who was at Newcastle at the time. Cameron Jerome was fined £50,000 actually. The three of them all got done in terms of placing bets. But Andros Townsend is an individual who's been very vocal, probably helped by the fact he'd had a spell for England around about that time, in terms of, yes, he's had a gambling problem. Yes, he's suffered with mental health issues. And obviously the two are intrinsically linked, right? We know that. Gambling, if you're in an addiction phase, is no different to drinking and gambling and whatever other vices that you may well be addicted to. Gambling is up there. Now, obviously the betting companies are very much, make sure it's fun. And if you're out of control, don't bet. Let me tell you, from my experience of working in that industry, it is very, very difficult to manage at a shop level in terms of individual X who, let's take an example. I've worked in a betting shop and individual X comes into the shop and I've never seen his face before and starts smashing down hundreds of pounds over the counter. I have no idea what his historical is. I don't know if he's the banker trader, your mate, who's rich and got no issues, or I don't know if he's self-excluded from every betting shop in Birmingham, for example. I would not have that information. So at that level, it is incredibly difficult for staff to manage. In terms of online stuff, they will shut you down as soon as you're winning. If you are losing, they will keep taking your money.
Is that how it works?
Of course, absolutely. Of course, absolutely.
I reckon over the course of the year, I probably waste about £300 or £400 max over a year. And I bet £2 and £3 and £4 and £5. I can easily see how it can spiral.
You have a lot of winners then.
No. I just like to stick £2 on a 1,000 to 1 accumulator or something, just for a bit of fun more than anything else.
Well, that's it. You're in control of what you're doing. Although you're not in control of good betting. I can tell you that.
I'm in control. What's controlling me is fear of losing money. It's when you win that you get sucked in more. When you lose, unless you have a certain mindset of chasing your losses,
it's the chasing. That's when you're done. When you get on the chasing spiral, it is incredibly difficult to step away from that, because there's always the next win tomorrow. And that's the mindset. That's, and it's the drug, the addiction, the thrill of tomorrow might be my day, or today might be my day. And I think through boredom and stuff, a lot of footballers will obviously struggle through that. I mean, Jerry Barton's expressed a number of times, say, for example, an overnight stay for an away game. You're up in your hotel room at 9 o'clock at night. Is that what a 25-year-old male footballer, for example, wants to be doing on their Friday night? No. So you've got to have extreme discipline. So what can you do when you're stuck in a hotel room by yourself? Gamble. I mean, a lot of them now will be playing FIFA and whatnot, so I get that. But there'll be a lot of others who are like, 1 o'clock in the morning, what American sports can I bet on at this time? Or so, yeah, difficult. And obviously, as I said, Barton reckons that half the players in the Premier League are gambling, and he didn't instigate that. It wasn't football.
Yeah, I think half are probably gambling, but I'd say there's maybe, I don't know, but there's definitely more than a handful that have a problem, an addiction or an illness associated to it.
I think that's fair. It's not the sort of thing that's going to come up much in conversation at the moment, unless someone, again, like a high profile like Trippier, who comes out and says, okay, people need help. Now, Kieran Trippier's never, so he says, never placed a bet. So he's obviously, if that's true, he hasn't got any issues, etc. I think the claim, say, from Sturridge is, what are you going to do to help me make sure this doesn't happen? But as you've said, don't be stupid enough to open your mouth. I just don't know if that's right.
It's hard.
And it seems like
is what it is.
It seems like that's where Trippier's been done. Although the wording of Kieran Trippier's statement doesn't say he didn't tell someone else to have a bet and
No.
for them to make money out of it. I don't believe
No.
for a second. Kieran Trippier, trust me, with the signing on fee he would have got and the wages he's on, it really wouldn't have been worth his trouble to try and make a couple of grand out of moving to Atletico Madrid. So we'll find that out in the wash in a couple of weeks. The other thing, obviously, from Barton, which was something we covered when we did gambling in football a few months back, is the double standards of you can't bet on it, but it's going to be advertised on your football shirt. It's going to be advertised on the hoardings, etc.
That's very, very difficult that we've spoken about. I mean, when you choose a certain profession, there are a lot of professions that have a lot of caveats and strings that go along with them. Like if you're a professional footballer, you know that you can't be a smoker. You're going to be looked down upon or frowned upon if you're a smoker. So if you want to be a smoker, don't be a footballer.
Some of the greatest ever players have smoked.
Yeah, true. But a different generation, right? All right, let's say, smoking weed. If you're a footballer, you can't be out every day getting high. It just doesn't work. The two don't go hand in hand.
I don't know. What are they doing at the moment? Smoking balloons? I don't know.
Yeah, true. So there's lots of professions that have restrictions that come with them. And there's other professions that don't. If you make that choice, you've got to understand that now the profile of football gambling is one of those restrictions that's placed on you and your life, and that's how it goes. And is it right? It goes with territory, right? If you want the sponsor to be Bet365 on your stadium, which means that you can earn 60 grand a week instead of 50 grand a week, goes with the flow, goes with the territory.
Yeah, it's interesting. For those who may not have heard that pod we did, I thought it was a few months ago now, we talked about the number of clubs who have sort of shirt sponsorship of gambling companies and obviously currently none of the big
Top six
do.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of sponsorships going forward, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if these gambling companies survive well, and many of them will, by the way, then they're going to be the sort of companies that are going to continue to fund your lower Premier League sides, Championship sides, etc. So unless we spoke about the possibility, because it was being discussed about completely banning those types of sponsors, I don't feel like that sort of thing's going to come into place now, because it's going to be take what money you can. And then it might be something that gets reassessed in 5 to 10 years or so. I think in terms of, it was something that was going to be discussed in Parliament in terms of banning it. I mean, if you're potentially taking away the livelihood of a championship club by taking away that sponsorship in this current climate, that's a dangerous precedent. Unfortunately, whether we think the evils or not of gambling, a lot of gambling companies are going to be part of saving some football clubs here, which is potentially an evil, but that's life at the moment.
Maybe we've just stumbled on the solution, James.
Go on.
Maybe we legalise weed, and then there'll be some big weed companies that emerge in this country, and then they can sponsor the football clubs, and we can get rid of gambling in this country or in sport.
Right.
That method.
I think it might be a different cycle and a different a different addiction problem, maybe.
Oh dear, yeah. I'm not sure. I've never been to watch a game in Ajax Amsterdam. You can tell me. I'm assuming the stadium doesn't stink of weed in Amsterdam.
I can tell you that some of the smells by that canal was something different, mate.
I think one of my favourite videos, we're getting a little bit distracted, one of my favourite videos is the Ajax Stadium singing along with Bob Marley's son, Don't Worry, Be Happy. Have you ever seen that video?
I have seen the video, yes. It was brought to my attention after the semi-final.
That atmosphere, that state, that looked something else. And so everybody, don't worry, be happy and don't gamble. I think that's the message of the day.
That song, in my opinion, cost them their place in the Champions League final.
Really?
Yes. I told you before, it pissed our lot off. The whole ground singing it and their players keeping our players waiting on the pitch while the whole crowd was singing it. And to be fair, even in that moment as a fan in the away end, I was like, this is mental. It's some sight to get like 40-odd thousand singing that together. Is some sight.
Yeah, of course, it's the atmosphere, isn't it? So fantastic. There we go. A little rundown at gambling, James.
Yeah, I think it's a subject that we are certainly going to stumble on again in coming months and years and Decades, maybe. Who knows, Suj?
Decades, definitely, because
Oh, yeah.
when the first football club is sponsored by a weed company, I'm going to dig this podcast out and I'm going to share it everywhere.
Wow. Okay.
Decades. You said decades. Decades, James. Trust me. Within 10 years, it wouldn't surprise me.
I just want to see it now. Tottenham Hotspur sponsored by Dope or
Oh dear. Fantastic.
I prefer Dope to the red AIA I've got on the shirt at the moment.
Oh dear. There we go. What we've got left this week, James?
We are quiz tomorrow. A to Z of Premier League, and what I mean A to Z of Premier League is 26 questions. Each answer will represent a letter of the alphabet. Certain answers are going to influence how you answer other answers. Our Thursday throwback will be on Paul Gascoigne. I don't know how we're going to keep that to around about half hour, but we shall.
Maybe we won't.
I'll stream Friday afternoon, and obviously I'll be streaming Wednesday night and Saturday afternoon for Champ Man as well.
Champ Man on the way. Wild card, any closer to figuring out?
My wild card is launched, yes.
Launched, but then you can always unlaunch it.
That is true, although it takes quite a while to undo all the changes that you've made. I think once
you're launched.
Screenshots are a must.
Great, good stuff. Guys, if you've been tuning in and listening to all of the content during this time, we really, really do appreciate all of your love and support and interaction on Twitter as well. So do find us at Suj and Shara at Planet FPL Pod on there. If you hit the like button or notification bell or whatever it is, depending on where you are, subscribe and what have you, you'll be alerted as soon as we put some new content live. And so you can jump on as soon as we do. It's there for you pretty much every day of the week, give or take nowadays. So do make sure you do that. But be safe and ciao for now.
Be nice to each other, everybody. Cue music, man, child.